Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are. Hello and welcome to episode 211 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Chris, and this is Paris.
Hello.
This time I read Lunar Justice by Charles L. Harness, which was provided to us by Beastwiththeleast, our fine patron. He didn't say shit about it, so we're going to find out what's going on in here together.
Yeah,
Paris,
thanks
or at
again.
least you will find out in a cascaded way, because I already found out.
Yeah, thanks again for just shipping us this book. I love when people send us books or creepily leave books on our porches. It's a really great experience.
Well, can I push back on that second one?
It's fun for me to hear about it, Chris, when they end up creepily on your porch.
Okay, well, So I have to say, when I opened the package, the cover of this thing was just such a feast for the eyes. It is it's a judge man. He's got a lot of jowls, and he's got the powdered wig on. He's raising his gavel in a threatening manner. There's a glass dome behind him. It's just
not a moon? Is that not the moon?
No, that's a glass dome.
Oh, that's confusing.
There's a glass dome that features heavily in the story.
Okay.
I also thought, perhaps it's at the moon, but there was a glass dome. I think it's a glass dome. It was a little unclear, to be honest with you.
Pyrex dome. I don't know.
It's breakable in some fashion, shall we say, because the breaking of the glass dome. We'll get to that. Anyway, it's a lovely cover. Just very 80s sci-fi kind of thing happening here, even though it was published in 1998, apparently.
98? That thing looks two decades older than 98. That looks like a 78.
The copyright page says 98 on this one, but it does indeed look like it's way older than that.
That's not just the year it was published. That's the original publishing date?
Let me look at the copyright.
That is...
I'm sorry, 1991.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, first printing August 1991.
All right, well, that's still...
I was wrong by 7 years, but that's still pretty late in the game for a cover like this.
Yeah, for real.
Which I will try to take a picture of so that we can add it to episode notes, because it is really worth it. Or just Google Lunar Justice by Charles L. Harness. I'm sure they didn't bother coming up with a second cover for a second printing, because this is as good as you're going to get.
I hope so.
Okay. Anyway, Beastwiththeleast sent that to us for free. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Didn't offer any other comment. So
I love it. I love when we just get books out of thin air and we just have to read them. That's great.
Okay. Well, if this is your first time listening to the show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, which didn't happen this time. That looks like a sick ass cover. Title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, like today, we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend. So we do the opposite of what most people do in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet. Usually this experiment results in a disappointing read, but once in a while we end up liking the book. In addition to our usual barnyard language, today's episode includes discussion or mention of judicial malfeasance and some murder. There's a little murdering happening here. Just a little bit of death happening here. Other than that, not so bad. Once again, I feel like I'm getting lucky on my picks for this year, whereas yours seem a little more fraught.
I like that we're going to be talking about judicial malfeasance today. That sounds great. Sounds like a thing we actually haven't encountered in a book ever somehow. So I don't know. It's a new territory.
Oh, trust me. There's some jurisdiction issues happening in this book that are the core of my problems with it. But we will get to that. For now, I can read you the back. Oh, yes.
I mean,
that aren't on our Discord,
jurisdiction issues,
have to add in
judicial malfeasance. It's time for the dunk.
That was a Discord sound that won't be. I'll have to add that in later. For now, I will read you the back of the book summary. Since this is a physical book that I have in my hand, it is the literal back of the book and not the Amazon blurb.
Delightful.
Okay, here we go. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall. The powerful Peace Eternal Corporation has a solution to Earth's staggering overpopulation problem, a government-supported program of clean, efficient mass murder. Billionaire philanthropist Michael Dorr has a better way. Lamplighter, a remarkable process that will enable safe colonization of Jupiter's moons. But Dorr has been set up to be tried for treason before a kangaroo lunar court. And Quentin Thomas, a patent lawyer with astonishing telekinetic abilities, is to handle the defense. Unfortunately, the moon's corrupt Lord Chancellor and his bought jury have already sentenced the accused and his attorney to death, unless Jupiter catches fire within 24 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we're in for here. It lays it out pretty cleanly. That's actually a really good back of the book summary.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there that, like, so the whole Peace Eternal mass murdering people is honestly kind of like a throwaway line later in the book. It's a little bit background. Like, you know, it's some of the motivation, shall we say, for the Lord Chancellor here. But we'll get to that in my summary. Why don't I give you our characters and setting here?
Yeah, I'm invested in today's plot. This sounds interesting. I'm into it. This could be an Amazon Prime 8-episode series, I feel like.
I would watch the fuck out of that, man. Okay. So we're generally on the moon. Big surprise.
Hell
here.
Yeah. On the moon.
It starts off on slightly future Earth. Who knows exactly how far in the future? That's not, the year isn't really talked about too much. We're space traveling, and there's a livable area on the moon. It's just like one big complex. It's described as a mini metropolis. Okay. It is like at least 10 to 20 kilometers long, based on the presence of a long one-way tunnel that is described very early on in the journey. So it's got Elon Musk's stupid one-lane tunnel or whatever happening in there, I think.
Oh, that sucks. But, I mean, it kind of makes sense for contained experimental colony, you know, I guess.
Yeah.
The only approved usage of this.
I would best describe it as a mini city, although we never really go further into any areas that aren't like one hotel, the courtroom, a main area that connects them, and like that's it for the most part. Okay, as far as our characters, we have Quentin Thomas, a patent lawyer and high-level psi user. Psi as in PSI, as mentioned in the back of the book blurb. He's got some extra special telekinetic abilities. His telekinetic ability is that he can essentially control electrons and like read their passage through circuits, so he can like read databases, and like if you've got anything electrical at all on you, he has some control of it. He still has to like crack passwords to get into things.
What?
Listen, man.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so that he's the main character. He's got telekinetic powers and he's a patent lawyer. He's got a girlfriend named Nadis, Nadys. I'm just pronouncing it like Gladys, but with an N at the beginning.
Yeah.
Nadis Blanding, his girlfriend, who doesn't really want to get married for some reason. He's like really in love with her, super, super in love with her, but she's like, I don't know, man, marriage is a whole thing, especially for women. And he's like, all right, cool. You can take your time on it, but he really wants to get married to Nadis.
Okay.
We have Martin Ryle, Lord Chancellor of the Moon, the only judge on the whole moon, in fact. There's just one of them, and it's Martin Ryle.
Doesn't seem like enough. If he's also the chancellor and judge, that seems like too much, even for one small metropolis. I feel like we need more.
At some point in the story, Quentin hacks into the like court database, and there's 3 cases on the docket. So I don't know, maybe not a lot of crime on the moon, I'm guessing.
Weird. I would expect maybe just being in space makes people more cautious and less likely to crime. I'm
They're like,
really
okay,
sure.
we really can't fuck up Earl. Everyone's getting blown out into the void. So
I mean,
no
yeah.
crime, please. We have Harry Vulpin, the prosecutor for the people. We have Michael Dorr, CEO of Penal Systems, Inc. and leader of the Lamplighter Project.
All right, just no subtlety. Just, we're Prison Inc.
Okay, right. Except they don't do anything with prisons. There's nothing to do with Penal Systems Inc. does not do prisons.
What do they make, pencils? Like, what is their company?
Right. So you will find out in the summary what they make. That is somewhat related to law enforcement, shall we say. And then we have 4 witnesses that appear in the case. We have Dr. Zoll, first witness, a nuclear expert and former Lamplighter employee. We have Furcus, the second witness, ex-comptroller of Lamplighter.
He just one name, just like Cher, just Furcus.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Same
we have
for
Boslow,
the
yes.
Okay.
The third witness, resident manager of a Lamplighter station on Io, one of Jupiter's moons. So because the Lamplighter Project is about igniting Jupiter, they have a station on a moon that is
I'm going to need some more information on that, on igniting Jupiter.
Yes. Yeah, that'll come up. And then we have Jarvis, the fourth witness, another nuclear expert and part of the Lunar Geologic Survey. So he's part of a science team on the moon that is looking for deposits of minerals by using like seismometers and nuclear weapons to shake the moon a little bit. That's the project.
Oh, yeah, I don't know about that. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Paris, our format this season is that I am going to deliver a longer form summary to you and the listeners. You haven't experienced this book yet, so you get to kind of react along with the listeners to whatever's going on here. Please feel free to interrupt and exclaim and do whatever you must as this goes on. And I will have some periodic queries for you. Perhaps I'll do a reading, and then we'll get into the rubric that we introduced last season towards the end, although that'll be a little speedier.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, Paris, are you ready for Lunar Justice?
Yeah, I'm ready. All
right, here we go. Quentin Thomas is an everyday patent lawyer pining after his public sector patent lawyer girlfriend, Natis, who just won't commit to marriage with him. They're on vacation on some resort owned by Peace Eternal, and Quentin's psionic powers that allow him to interact with anything electrical tell him the curtains are actually recording him.
Wait, the curtains?
Yes, listen, there's listening devices in the curtains. He's perfectly sane. I don't see what the problem is. So, although psi is a known quantity in this story, again, psi being PSI as in like psionic powers, so it's known to exist in certain people. It's not necessarily that secret. Each person's psi power level and ability isn't easily known.
Wait, so everyone has it?
No, not at all. It's just like some people have some psionic abilities, and they can come in all, it's like X-Men shit, like all shapes and sizes of things that can happen. But Quentin chooses to hide his, since such a power allows him extreme access to basically anything that runs on electricity, including high security databases, even though, like I said before, he still has to like crack the password to get into the databases. I'm unsure how tracing electron pathways allows you to get into and read databases, but you still have to get around the passcode. I'm guessing it's like...
I don't know that makes a ton of sense, but all right.
I mean, if you bring it down to the most basic level, it's like the specific sequence of ones and zeros has to happen that is the passcode for the server to allow you in. Listen, they don't get into it, so... Buy in right now, Paris, is what I need you to do.
All right, buying into the moon. Give me 10 on the moon. All right.
Usually, he simply has to discover the password encryption mechanism, try to get around it. Using his psi power, he can get all the way into Peace Eternal's corporate network, only to discover the account on Natis has an interesting note that reads T, July 27, which is a few days away.
Hey, hang on a second. What is Peace Eternal? We didn't get a description of what that is.
It is a corporation that seems to own a lot of resorts, and later on in the book is described as sort of a little bit Scientology-esque. It's not really delved too deeply into. It's like you go to these places where you're given an interview by Peace Eternal, and they offer you like a placement on a resort for I don't know, just to like give you a place to be because like there's a lot of overpopulation happening.
Okay.
And in exchange, like the dark secret is that they're actually just murdering people for their like people resources, like just taking their money and like bodies and like using them for whatever the hell.
Oh, okay. Question, why was he breaking into this network?
So because the curtains were listening. He was like, that's weird that the curtains are listening.
So
I'm going to like dive deeper.
The listening device to Peace Eternal and then was trying to figure out. Okay.
Because they were on a Peace Eternal resort.
Great.
And he was like, well, the curtains have to be connected to the network so I can break. I mean, they should really be air gapping some of their listening devices.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess they didn't know about that in 1991 or future 1991. Okay. Thank you. I am more caught up now.
Continuing. So Quentin's mystified by the fact that there's this T July 27 thing on Naddis's account, but has to drop it and leave the resort to meet a client, a member of Penal Systems Incorporated, who needs his consultation on a new patent.
Okay.
He realizes he's also being watched here because of his psi powers, and that the bathroom he uses doesn't really drain into the sewage systems that he would expect, but is most likely collecting some biological samples from him. He messes with the systems in the bathroom just to fuck with whoever's watching him.
What does he do? Pour like Kool-Aid into it or like, you know?
No, he like makes like, because like everything in the future is connected to an electronic system, which honestly isn't too far off. So he like has the water run and fucks with like the pressure management system that's supposedly in there. Like he just goes in there and like pulls a lot of pranks essentially. So it turns out Penal Systems Incorporated has created a new guillotine, one with guilt-free killing, since dropping the blade requires that 3 buttons be pushed simultaneously, and an internal mechanism randomly selects which button actually drops the blade. They are negotiating a license with Lunar Judicial Systems, who want live demonstrations before they use it for executions. Not like on an actual person, but just like, hey, bring the guillotine up here to the moon and prove that pressing the buttons drops the blade.
Couple questions already.
Okay.
The lunar colony only has like 3 pending cases. How many, like, do they really need to kill that many people up there? Like, doesn't seem like a need, really.
Well, thus the conspiracy that is on hand here, Paris.
Okay,
but yeah. It does feel a little strange that they're like, man, these 3 cases, we need the guillotine up here for these guys.
I mean, also, like, it's the cool future. Why do they need a guillotine? I just feel like that's sort of a martial weapon, like, way to kill someone. And I'm like,
there are lasers in this book too. So like,
why are we not lasering or just like putting people to sleep with this seems...
Well, you see, this is the guilt-free mechanism, Paris. That's why the patent is here.
But you could guilt-free injections or lasers just as well. Why the fucking guillotine?
No, it would only work with the guillotine. I don't see how that would work at all, Paris. That doesn't make any sense. I'd rather just send a guillotine up to the moon.
Okay, sure. All right. Guillotines to the moon.
Okay, so again, Lunar Judicial Systems want a live demonstration before they use their guillotine for executions, which could be starting as early as next week because there's a high-profile case in the news. Michael Dorr, billionaire CEO of the Lamplighter Project, has disappeared. The Lamplighter Project endeavors to ignite Jupiter and turn it into a small red sun by dumping nuclear waste into the Great Red Spot so that enough nuclear material resides in Jupiter's core to start a nuclear reaction.
Why?
Do you have a problem, Paris?
Why would you do this?
So the idea is that if we ignite Jupiter, we will render 3 of the moons that are far enough away from Jupiter to get some of the warmth of the sun that Jupiter now is habitable. Because we have all these people here on Earth. There's an overpopulation problem. And we got to move them somewhere else.
But can a solar system have 2 suns and function?
You know, Paris? Well, probably not, judging by, like, I actually Googled, can you ignite Jupiter? This was apparently an idea suggested in some other earlier sci-fi books.
Course.
I think it appears in an Asimov book somewhere. So there was actually a lot of, like, Quora and even Stack Overflow and Reddit threads about, like, what, could you ignite Jupiter? Would that help anything? And most people were like, it would be extremely hard. You would have to make Jupiter extremely dense and huge. And also that would fuck up a lot of gravity things in our solar system.
There are other solar systems with more than one sun, but I'm saying like our particular system. I don't know how our regular
Things
big
would
sun
get weird
would
pretty
feel.
quickly.
Like the sun might be like, what the fuck is up with this smaller, denser sun? The fuck did you come from? Like it didn't happen as a result of the natural sort of flow of things in space. So I feel like it would fuck shit up a little bit.
Yeah. I think our Earth being in the Goldilocks zone would, be a bit of an issue there because all of a sudden that Goldilocks zone is not the same place it was before. So it feels like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here.
Well, it also feels like you would burn Earth alive because
that's what
you'd have another sun. Like, oh no, we have a problem with population. Well, I guess we'll just fry everyone left on Earth. Like, I don't know enough about astronomy, but I know just enough to make me very skeptical of this arrangement.
I think I'm going to have to ask you to buy in again, Paris, because that's despite the fact that there are many passages going very deeply into like the nuclear reaction mechanics to ignite Jupiter, of which I will read from at a later point.
Okay.
This bit of like, wait a minute, what happens if there's a second sun in the system all of a sudden is very glossed over as well, or just accepted by every character as being fine. So once again, we need to lay some more chips down on the table here.
Astronomers, planet scientists, write in. What would happen if our particular solar system had two suns and one of them was Jupiter's moon, or Jupiter?
Particularly like a red sun that we created by igniting Jupiter. I'm sure there's some density materials and gravity mathematics. Yeah, okay. Anyway, they're trying to ignite Jupiter.
Okay, got it.
So Dor is so convinced he can do it that he told everyone that he will ignite Jupiter by 5 p.m. on July 27th of this year, having made the claim years ago.
Okay.
Recently, Dor attempted to use a psi enhancer with a powerful psi user named Dr. Siva to ignite Jupiter, but the effort failed and Dor disappeared. It is now suspected that the whole lamplighter operation may have been a fraudulent endeavor meant to embezzle funds provided by various governments who invested in the project, since turning Jupiter into a small sun would render 3 of its moons habitable while destroying all the other moons around Jupiter, so the burgeoning human population has somewhere to reside. It is also suspected that Dor is hiding out on the moon. For some reason, this embezzlement scheme would be considered treason on the moon, so the guillotine is probably needed for that trial, since treason is a capital offense. Now, Paris, my first question for you, do you have any problems with the jurisdiction here? And do you think Dor is for real?
Okay, so Dor wants to ignite Jupiter. He says he's going to do it, but he disappears before it can happen.
He tried already with one other guy with his like psi enhancer. So the plot is ostensibly that Dr. Seaver was some kind of psi user that could use a psi enhancing device that Michael Dor had a hand in creating or funding the research for, so that Dr. Siva would ignite Jupiter from afar. That didn't work. Dr. Siva died unexplainedly, and Dor has gone missing, which is why there's this whole hullabaloo about trying him for treason and why the guillotine would possibly be needed on the moon as early as next week.
I don't know. I don't understand why a Ponzi, or not a Ponzi scheme, but like an embezzlement scheme is treason.
Because you've stolen from governments. But it's also treason on the moon. That's specifically is the thing. He's being tried on the moon for treason against terrestrial governments.
Well, treason is if you are allied with one government and you betray that government. If you were just taking money from 3 or 4 governments and you steal that money, it's not treason. I argue that it's not treason. It does not make any sense. But I guess in a future Earth. But even if it is, why? Yeah, the moon. Who does the moon belong to? Or is the moon kind of co-owned?
It seems like there's just a bunch of private corps up there, and like even the lunar judicial system.
So what? I don't understand. Like, if there is, okay, even if you want to say stealing money from governments is treason, even though it is clearly not, why would the moon be the place that this person was being Maybe because it doesn't belong to any one government. It's like the Moon UN. The Moon. I don't know. Moon.
Unclear, to be honest with you, Paris. I'm going to ask you to buy in once again. So I really need you to go all in on this. No, I don't, because this was my major problem as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if I missed something. I don't think I did. I tried to read closely and reread parts because this was a relatively short book, like 178 pages or so.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I had the bandwidth to do so. And I really wasn't catching anything about why embezzlement from terrestrial governments constitutes treason and is tried on the moon by a judicial system that doesn't seem to be operated or controlled by any terrestrial government. It's just kind of its own thing, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe? I mean, there's a conspiracy going on here, which we will get into shortly, but it still doesn't make any sense.
I definitely think Dor was just stealing money from people so he could fuck off and have a, I don't know, cool life in exile or whatever.
Okay, so you also think that Dor should be perhaps put on trial for something, perhaps just embezzlement.
Yeah, just embezzlement is fine. We don't need to go to treason. Go that far.
Okay, anyway. Quentin gets shuffled off to the moon immediately to accompany the guillotine, much to his surprise, to help secure the license deal for it.
Wait, but he's a patent lawyer. Why does he have to go to the demonstration?
Yes, exactly. Because he's like the consulting patent lawyer. So they're like, what this thing does because you read the patent. So go to the moon and demonstrate it. There's the Lunar over there that's going to the moon. And Quentin just like goes on it. He's like, but I have to tell my girlfriend. And they're like, we already told her. Everything's taken care of.
This is all very, very weird. Okay.
So yeah, he's supposed to help secure the license deal for it. He is told to assemble the guillotine, demonstrate it, then immediately meet up with someone at room 41 at a hotel on the moon. Quentin is confused but goes along with it.
Yeah, what?
And reminisces about the time that Natus taught him to write proper patent claims with good rhythm, since that's a thing now. I don't think I could summarize this effectively, Paris.
Is she also a lawyer?
Yeah, she's a public sector patent lawyer. She works at the patent office for
so they both are. Okay.
They are both patent lawyers. They met at as patent lawyers interacting because he was doing private sector stuff. She works at the patent office for the government, quote unquote. And so they sort of got together, even though they knew each other from school before, yada, yada. There's a whole backstory on that one. But anyway, like I said, that last sentence probably confused you a little bit. So I would like to read a passage here that I think gives you a good idea of the vibe for this book. Something fluttered past the lawyer's face, and he ducked by reflex. The thing slithered and jerked in a weird, skittering flight pattern. A slithy tove, mused Thomas, gyring and gimbling in the wave. In the midst of death, life waltzes on. A moth? Insects here? Well, why not? And do they undergo special evolution in response to the 1/6 gravity? And fit predestined niches like the finches in Darwin's Galapagos studies? How do they get here? With the flora, probably. The biggest moth on Terra is already the Luna moth. What would they evolve into here? And would their predator bats evolve proportionally? Fortunately, not his problem. Quentin Thomas was alone. He let himself sink slowly into the near silence. It reminded him of the opening lines in Gray's Elegy. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd wins slowly o'er the lea. The plowman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Interesting rhythm. Iambic pentameter? Would it work with the guillotine? The main claim might have began, a blade fixed between two guides. Only tetrameter, try again. Between two upright guides. Pentameter, but still not quite right. He wished Natus were here. She would fix it. They had danced nude that time at the Marriott, his mind and body reticulated, interwoven with hers, living, pulsing. She had taught him, rather tried to teach him, the rhythms of claim writing. To release your cerebral neurotransmitters, the same way as a musician. A good claim can be like a waltz. 3/4 time is excellent. Strauss, the Blue Danube. Tales from the Vienna Woods. The Emperor Waltz. That's all dactyl. 1, 2, 3, da, dee, dee. Listen, my children, and you shall hear. Not perfect, Dactyl, but you get the idea. I sprang to the stirrup, and Joris and he. That's a little better, isn't it? Anapest is quite similar, 2 D's and then the da. You are old Father William the young man said. Process comprising reacting a resin. Music, you should definitely hear music. Method of forming a waterproof coating. Got it? Play us a tune on an unbroken spinet. You hear? This is the forest primeval, the murmuring pines and the hemlocks. Product containing in parts by weight, 40 of isoscenate. Perhaps you should listen to some classical music when you draft your claims. I'll give you some tapes. He recalled how the weird fad of claim rhythm had originated. Ex parte radix, the famous patent case, had gone to the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice had refused to vote. The CJ, a PhD in Elizabethan literature with useful pieces in North American poetry and an accomplished amateur cellist, abstained with the brief but blistering comment. Claim 1 is nonsense, but it is not mere nonsense, it is raucous cacophonous nonsense. At least Edward Lear blessed his nonsense with rhyme and rhythm. I cannot understand how the commissioner permitted this profanation of our mother tongue to exit the patent office. Now, of course, all patent claims going to the Supreme Court were traumatic events for the patent office and the patent bar. This was always especially true for the hapless commissioner, who had the task of explaining the new decision to staff and public, and of establishing new practice guidelines conforming to the new case. This was not easily done. The court's attempts to clarify a knotty point in patent law had once been compared to efforts of a hammer-wielding chimpanzee to repair a mainframe computer. In short, the Supreme Court gave the Patent Office the heebie-jeebies. The other high court patent cases were bad enough, but Radix was special. The commissioner had been mentioned personally, and, as in a semiconductor, his response far exceeded the stimulus. It was rumored that he took 2 wrong turns in driving home from Crystal Plaza that faithful decision day, and that when he finally opened his front door, he could not remember the names of his wife and children. No matter, by the time he entered his 7th floor suite the next morning, he had formulated a plan. He knew, or thought he knew, exactly what the CJ wanted. Working through a staff of dedicated deputies, he set up seminars with experts in literature, language, and poetry, especially poetry. The group supervisors and primaries dutifully attended these seminars. They learned rhyme. They learned rhythm. And the words slowly filtered down into the ranks of examiners and assistant examiners. Notices appeared in the official gazette explaining the new guidelines. Rhyme and rhythm were henceforth required, with retention of sense and coherence where possible. But just then the country elected a new president who appointed a new commissioner. He left enforcement of the R&R rules to the discretion of the individual examining groups. Some used it, some didn't. Naddis's group stayed with it. He remembered. Ah, yes, that evening in his room at the Marriott, they had danced nude. Oh, Naddis. Naddis.
You know,
okay, so that's the vibes here, Paris.
I mean, I guess I appreciate the creativity around the rhythmic, musical, legal stuff.
It's fun. That's creative and fun and very silly. It's like, this is a silly book. Like, let's not have any bones about this one. It's a little bit off kilter like that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so how do you feel about patent claim, rhyme, and rhythm? Would you like to see any other legal
I think that's
areas
so cool.
be put to meter?
I mean, I think it's funny and kind of, I don't know, it gives the book a little flavor, like, and it also feels sort of like a possible, if a possible natural evolution of, humanity in the future. Like, it doesn't seem so absurd, right? It seems like something that could maybe happen. So I don't know. I think it's fine. I think it's an interesting inclusion. I don't know what it really does for like the plot. That sounds like it sucks, but it's a cool idea.
Once Quentin arrives on the moon, he is whisked away to the Lunar Rotunda, capital R, to assemble the guillotine and demonstrate it to a lunar bailiff. After doing so, the bailiff and some media people that were around leave him alone. Quentin takes note that the rotunda connects to 4 wings: the commercial wing, the record-keeping wing, the law enforcement / police / detention wing, and finally, the courtroom. Quentin heads to the AA Inn to room 41, and after knocking is told to enter by the person inside, except that the doorknob is locked. Turns out it's password-protected, electrically locked knob, which he easily gets around.
Very convenient for him with his very specific ability.
Yes, indeed. Inside is Michael Dorr, who wanted to test Quentin's psi abilities, since he is looking for a specific man, a lawyer who can defend him in Lunar Court that is also a powerful psi that can use Dorr's psi enhancer to ignite the nuclear material.
Oh my god, he really is he's still trying to do this, still trying to make this happen.
Dorr got close to igniting Jupiter with Dr. Siva, but Quentin's psi is better. He was the one watching Quentin and collecting biosamples to make sure of this because he owns Penal Systems Inc., PSI.
Oh god, okay.
Quentin thinks he's not cut out to do law in a criminal lunar trial since he's just a patent lawyer, but Dorr thinks it's going to be fine. Dorr tells Quentin he knows there's a conspiracy against him. Peace Eternal has bought out many shares of Dorr's company as a short sell, so they need Dorr's effort to collapse spectacularly so they come out on top of the short sell.
Oh, I love that there's a short selling scheme going. It's amazing.
Igniting Jupiter would mean Peace Eternal would be ruined as they'd owe billions.
Right.
Dorr
Nice.
knows that someone on the moon wants him dead to guarantee that the stock tanks, and he's pretty sure the Lord Chancellor Martin Ryle is in on it, and intends to put on a sham trial in order to execute Dorr.
Damn, all right.
Suddenly, police burst in and take Dorr into custody. He names Quentin as his lawyer so he won't be arrested as well. Quentin returns to his own room at the AA to find everything in there has been tapped, which he uses to trace a path to the Lunar Judiciary database in order to find out about the arraignment for Dorr. He cracks the Judiciary database password, Dorr must die.
Oh, wow, okay, all right. So we're just
That's the password for the entire
on,
database for all cases, all three of the cases that are on the moon.
Okay, so it's like, just in case you didn't think the conspiracy was real, this really cements
Yes.
That's it. Okay.
And finds out that Dorr is indeed scheduled to be arraigned tomorrow morning and that there are 4 witnesses for the people. Dr. Zoll, a nuclear expert and ex-Lamplighter employee who will testify to the impossibility of igniting Jupiter by 5 p.m. on July 27th. Farkas, a former comptroller for Lamplighter who has documents outlining Dorr's embezzlement efforts. Boslow, a manager on board a Lamplighter station on Io who will also assert the impossibility of igniting Jupiter by 5 p.m. on July 27th. And finally, Jarvis, another nuclear expert who is in charge of the Lunar Geologic Survey, a team that looks for evidence of water in mineral deposits on the moon by reading seismic measurements taken by shooting a nuke on one end of the moon and taking readings from strategically placed seismometers all over the moon.
You know, there are other ways to find evidence of water in mineral deposits, and they don't involve nuclear explosions.
We shoot a nuke up the moon's ass, and then we just read all of the seismic data from there, and that'll tell us where we can possibly find some water.
I think that's the most efficient way to do that.
It seems like there's a lot of governmental and other inefficiencies happening here on the moon, man, so...
Okay.
Anyway, Quentin decides he'd like to defend Dorr from this lunar kangaroo court. At the arraignment, Quentin does indeed find out that lunar court is a bit wacky. There's only the one judge in the whole damn moon because it's a relatively small mini metropolis where there's like 3 cases on the docket, as we've mentioned before. And they reuse grand juries as sitting juries, and discovery is barely a thing, if not at all.
So there's no like Brady, so you can't even have a Brady violation if there's no fucking discovery. So
nope.
Wow, all right, that sucks.
Quentin faces off against the People's Counsel, Harry Vulpin, who seems to be all winky-nudgy with the Lord Chancellor Martin Ryle.
Okay.
Bail is set at $1 billion. Quentin and Dorr retreat to the AA to come up with a plan for the first 2 witnesses that will be appearing tomorrow for the first part of the trial. Dr. Zoll is just a technical expert, so they will simply use him to assert the particular nuclear process that would ignite Jupiter. Farkas documents that prove embezzlement are forgeries, and Dorr reveals that he caught Farkas embezzling from Lamplighter and was fired for it. The plan here is to do a bit of a fake-out. Truth drugs can be administered to witnesses on the stand.
Okay.
But alas, anti-truth drugs can be administered just before to counter the truth drug effects.
This is like a Looney Tunes plot.
Okay, interestingly, if you don't administer the truth drug after taking the anti-truth drug, the anti-truth drug becomes a truth drug. Quentin and Dorr bet that they can ask for a truth drug to be administered, which will cause Farkas to take the anti-truth drug. They will immediately rescind the request for the original truth drug and Farkas will thus tell the truth after all.
Wait, okay, I need
You need that explained again?
So, okay. The anti-truth, but if you just have the anti-truth drug in you, won't you just say only lies?
No, that's the point, is the anti-truth drug is just a truth drug if you don't take the other second truth drug after taking the
It's kind of like Narcan, like it doesn't do anything unless you actually are overdosing, like unless you're actually truth overdosing or
well, no,
whatever.
it actually, so it's like, think of it this way. There's 2 truth drugs, and one truth drug can counteract the effects of the first truth drug, so you're just normal and can tell lies again. But if you administer the antidote truth drug to the first truth drug, you are just taking one truth drug, and you are telling the truth. It's like 2 truth drugs that cancel each other out if you take both of them. Right. And if you take one of them, you will just tell the truth.
And no one's ever done this before. No one thought that this might be an issue, that they might fake them out.
Well, the whole deal is that, like, you're trying to secretly take the anti-truth drug first.
Right.
So that, like, you in the book, the way it's done is, like, he asks for a glass of water really quickly. Okay. And just, like, dumps the anti-truth drug into the water so he can take it before he is truth drugged. But then Quentin and Dora rescind the offer, the request. Okay. Just that, I know that was pretty confusing, but you're correct. It is very Looney Tunes up in the moon right now.
Looney Justice. Oh.
Ooh. I guess, lunatic justice. That's probably the pun in the title, I'm now realizing.
Yep.
Okay, this is basically exactly what happens. Dr. Zoll is asked about the mechanisms of igniting Jupiter by both councils, and Farkas does indeed fall for the truth drug request switcheroo, revealing that he was indeed commanded to forge documents to present in court by a mysterious payee who paid him millions of dollars to do so. Ryle strikes Farkas' testimony from the record, and Ryle asks to see Vulpin and Quentin in his chambers. In the chambers, Ryle basically reveals himself as a conspirator and shows Quentin a set of lingerie that were Naddis, with the insinuation that Naddis will be killed if Quentin doesn't throw the case. Quentin says he has to think about it, and court is adjourned for a bit. Since Dor paid bail, he can give Quentin the psi enhancer that he hid in a compartment of the guillotine, which can only be easily accessed by Quentin's psi abilities. And Quentin uses this to dive into the Peace Eternal databases all the way back on Earth, because he's so psi enhanced now, he doesn't even have to be in the same fucking room as anything he's accessing. He could be hundreds of thousands of miles away on the moon, and he can still do this thing. He hacks into all the Peace Eternal databases all the way back on Earth to remove any record of Naddis so that she's harder to find and kill. He resolves to ignite Jupiter using the psi enhancer, but knows that the Lord Chancellor will avoid having to look into space to see Jupiter alight by simply remaining in the courtroom. Quentin and Dor come up with a plan. The third witness, Boslow, is in a monitoring station on Io and will testify that all of his instruments indicate that Jupiter isn't igniting anytime soon. Because of communication delay being 40 minutes long, all his answers to Vulpin's questions are pre-recorded, so Quentin can't properly cross-examine them. He will simply ignite Jupiter a few hours before 5 p.m., so the nuclear reaction will have enough time to turn Jupiter into a red sun by the time 5 p.m. rolls around, and then ask Boslow to remain on video for the remainder of the trial with instruments in view. In addition to this, Quentin finds out that the Lunar Geologic Survey has decided to wait to blow up the nuke they have placed directly up the moon's ass to detect mineral deposits due to the hullabaloo around the trial. Quentin knows the nuke is on the opposite side of the moon on the rotunda, and if he times it right, he can use the seismic resonance from the nuke to blow a hole in the rotunda that you can see through, knowing that the emergency systems will eventually seal the rotunda back in quickly, since the moon, quote unquote, rings like a bell, and the seismologist didn't fucking account for that possibility, I guess.
Wait. Why? Hang on. I'm lost. Why would he? I don't understand why he needs to blow a hole in the rotunda so you can see through it.
So they need to prove that Jupiter is alight and ignited by 5 p.m.
Okay.
The judge is like, if I can't see it with my own eyes, I don't believe it, and you will be...
And he won't look at, like, a screen, like he has to see it actually happen.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right, this is...
So
right.
the rotunda is the glass dome. That is what is the glass dome on the cover is, which is a bad idea on the fucking moon, man. So the idea is that if Quentin can blow up the nuke that's up the moon's ass.
Hold on a second. But the rotunda's clear. Clear? Like a glass dome? You can already see through it. Why do you have to blow a hole in it?
I don't know, man. It's very unclear. I might have misinterpreted something here, but it mentions glass and then breaking things apart. Maybe it's not actually glass and I got that wrong. I'm willing to accept that.
I mean, glass doesn't necessarily have to be clear, but it is depicted as such on the cover.
Yeah, that's what confused me. Maybe that's just a nothing glass dome and that like I took the cover part too hard and it's just actually a solid sealed in rotunda. He does mention looking up at the stars in the rotunda, though, so it's very unclear to me.
Fucking blow a hole in a clear thing you can already see through. I don't understand.
I also don't understand. Again, I'm willing to accept that I got something wrong here. So if someone else has read Lunar Justice,
I can only assume that the rotunda is clear, but the courtroom is maybe opaque because maybe they want a closed courtroom, and that's what he's talking about.
No, it's definitely to blow the rotunda up a little bit so that space is revealed. Okay. That is clutch to this. Anyway, again, he knows there's a nuke that the Lunar Geologic Survey placed way deep up into the moon, and they've delayed blowing it up because of the trial hullabaloo, but Quentin can access it because of the psi enhancer, and there's a thing where like they bring the psi enhancer up in the trial as a piece of evidence to be looked at, so he can just use it from the courtroom in that way. Quentin can blow up the nuke, and this will cause a seismic resonance in the moon enough to crack open the rotunda, which you think would be a concern that all of the Lunar Geologic Survey scientists would have accounted for if blowing a nuke up would possibly crack open the rotunda on one side of the moon. But apparently they didn't. Shit. And Quentin's like, I'll just do that for a bit. So he knows that there's some automated fixing of the I guess the blown hull. I don't know what you would call that. The seepage into space that would be there. The loss. I mean, but people pressure
would die immediately. Like I can't imagine it would fix itself so quickly that there would be no casualties.
Yes, very unclear on this one. Anyway, he knows that he just needs to get the judge out into the rotunda after this happens, so that the judge can see Jupiter ignited for himself.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, okay. I've got some plot problems here, Paris. Okay. Again, so since Dwarf paid the bail, he can give Quentin the psi enhancer that he hid in a compartment of the guillotine, which Quentin can access because he has password cracking abilities.
Got it.
So anyway, the plan basically goes off without a hitch. Quentin does indeed start the nuclear reaction that will ignite Jupiter by using the psi enhancer. They bring it to court in order to use it in the dome-blowing plot as well. Boslow comically says, there's no way Jupiter is about to ignite and kill me. Here, I'll leave all the instruments in view for everyone until 5. And Jarvis is questioned a bit about lunar geology and where his nuke is so Quentin can find it using his psi enhancer. The psi enhancer is allowed to be used in court since Ryle is both sure of his victory and knows that since the case is being broadcast, it goes over better to make Dora and Quentin look like fools since he thinks the enhancer won't work. That is, until a note is given to him that states that Natus can't be killed because someone fucked around with all the Peace Eternal databases. But it's too late. Quentin uses the psi enhancer to blow the nuke. The instruments on Io start going haywire, and Boslow gets scared and tries to hide in one of the station's basements from Jupiter swallowing him the fuck up as it expands into a sun, which of course doesn't work.
So how many people are on that moon? Or, sorry, on Jupiter that they're just murdering?
No one's on Jupiter. Boslow was on a station on Io.
Yeah.
And as far as we know, he fucking dies. And if there was anyone else on the station, then they also fucking died.
Okay.
Because Ryle doesn't allow Boslow being eaten by Jupiter on screen as admissible evidence of Jupiter igniting, and the resonance from the nuclear explosions do indeed blow out the dome of the rotunda, creating a vacuum that starts pulling air out of the courtroom. Luckily, there are security irises that lock in the courtroom so that it's sealed in a little bit. Too bad they're controlled with electricity. Quentin basically manages to maneuver things in such a way that he can use a controlled opening of the iris to suck Ryle out into the rotunda, conveniently and directly into the waiting guillotine, which is triggered and beheads Ryle, who, by the way, was a 70% stakeholder of Peace Eternal, along with Vulpin and the leader of the grand jury, who, amidst the chaos, tries to use a laser to kill Dor. Quentin pushes Dor to safety, and the laser kills Vulpin instead. The foreman escapes through the iris that Quentin allows to open again and is crushed by a falling bit of debris outside. Now, I'm actually going to read that chapter as well, Paris. This is sort of the climactic moment of the whole entire book. And once again, very vibey with the style of the book here. And I think we'll give you a little bit clearer of an idea of how some things are kind of unclear in exactly how they're working. Okay. So this is chapter 20. Sentence first, verdict after. And this book does the thing where there's quotes at the beginning of every chapter, and the beginning of this chapter says,
my hated
demoniac
position.
frenzy, moping melancholy, and moonstruck madness. John Milton, Paradise Lost.
Oh, yes, we gotta call upon Milton, gotta pull him out of his fucking grave for this Looney Tunes ass book.
Basically, like any quote in classic literature that mentions the moon or moon madness is at the top of a chapter here.
You know what? If Harness was able to like feed himself and his family with this, fine. It's dumb, but fine. I hope he made money on it.
Okay, I'm going to read the entirety of this chapter here. It's about 6.5 pages.
Whew, all right. I'm buckled in.
Interesting, thought Thomas. They haven't even taken a vote. And I think I feel something, a very nice vibration in the floor. And what is your verdict, Mr. Foreman? Ryle's question dripped honey. He removed his wig and placed the black cap on his head. Now, just one computer picking minute, thought Thomas. You're not supposed to put on the black cap until you hear the guilty verdict. Even here. Except that, actually, he's following the Wonderland script verbatim. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. So this is all quite proper. And soon we'll all wake up with a pack of cards flying about our faces. And here comes the verdict. Guilty, Your Honor. Surprise, surprise, thought the lawyer. Will the defendant rise? Commanded Ryle. Dor got to his feet. Just seconds now, he whispered to Thomas. This court, boomed Ryle, declares that you have had a fair and impartial trial on the charge of treason, and that you have been found guilty by a fair and impartial jury of your peers. Michael Dor, have you anything to say before I pronounce sentence? Nothing, said the prisoner. All is now said. All is now done. Ryle didn't try to understand. The prisoner, having been given the opportunity to speak, I pronounce sentence. Michael Dor, I sentence you to death. Your evil corpus is to be taken immediately from this room, and it will be given to the blade, and your head will be severed from your body. May God have mercy on your soul. The guards will now escort you to the rotunda. As he finished his declaration, the Lord Chancellor looked up. The ceiling Luminex panels were flickering. No matter. Justice gallops. 4 burly uniformed guards brushed aside, loudly protesting Thomas, and began twisting Dor's hands behind his back to handcuff him. But they were having trouble because the floor was shaking. One guard was suddenly sick. Making gasping, gurgling sounds, he turned aside and leaned on the prosecutor's table. Vulpin backed away. At that moment, several other things happened of an even more puzzling nature. The courtroom was filled with a clanging roar, as though all Lunaplex had turned into a monster bell. The lights went out. Thomas seemed to remember that the safety irises were operative by emergency power. Some air would be lost, but then the irises would close. He smiled happily, and he waited. Here it came. He followed the architectural catastrophe in the rotunda with his ears. It really surprised him how long it took for the dome to disintegrate. It didn't collapse all at once. It sounded as though it were tumbling down a block or two at a time. He wanted to go outside and watch, but of course that was out of the question. Was it falling in the reverse order in which it had been built, with the crest dropping first? Probably no way to know. Makes a marvelous crescendo, though. And what's that roar? Of course, air swooshing out through the great hole left by the fallen dome into the vacuum of the lunar sky. And wow, look at that red glare coming in from the rotunda right into the courtroom. Fire? Yes. The fires of Jupiter. The new sun shining bountifully in the open sky. Oh, beautiful crimson glare, thought Thomas. He looked happily up toward the bemused chancellor. A clear and flagrant trespass, Ryle. Outrageous contempt of court. Are you going to stand for this? Couldn't we have at least a Perperian rebuke, my lord? Tell it to go away. But the Lord Chancellor seemed disinclined to issue any orders or make any rulings. He sat there at the bench, immobile, visible only because of the flickering red outlines. The bloated face opened and closed. Finally, sounds began to come out of the face. The man shrieked something unintelligible, stumbled down from the dais, and hurtled past tables and bar down the courtroom aisle towards the closing exit iris. The red glare was temporarily dimmed by interposition of the running man, but Thomas could see everything. Ryle stooped before the closed iris, peering through the little window of hardened glass in the very center. The ambiguous red glow from outside waved in and around the man's face, like flowering fires from some mythic Valhalla burning and forever changing the fate of the world. Quentin Thomas studied the creature at the iris for a moment, and he thought back to an incident in an undergraduate chemistry course. Organic 21. He had been standing just inside the swinging doors of the lab. At a bench somewhere behind him, a liter of ether ignited. The expanding gases had blown him head over heels through the door like a pellet through a dart gun. He had landed on his back halfway down the corridor. In his mind, he measured the distance from iris to guillotine. It would work. But then he paused. Did he need to do this terrible thing? The great farce was all over. Or was it? As long as Ryle lived, were he, Dor, Natus, safe? And that scene in Ryle's chambers blowing his nose on Ryle the Desecrator. Oh, damn, forever. The lawyer searched out the iris circuitry embedded in the door side. It was plainly laid out, and the closing the circuit and reactivating the iris was no problem. Martin Ryle, thought Quentin Thomas, you have murdered and would murder again, and I now pronounce sentence. The iris blades began to spin back into their receptacles. At first, the great rush of air simply pinned the jurist against the central iris orifice. He screamed, but it got him nothing. Then, as the blades continued their inexorable withdrawal, there was a mighty whoop, and Lord Chancellor Martin Ryle was blown out into the semi-vacuum of the rotunda. Throughout his perilous low-gravity flight, he remained in Thomas's line of sight. The lawyer caught a last glimpse of a terrified, red-lit face, staring up toward the miraculous nemesis sun. The scant courtroom audience had a marvelous, if momentary, view of the events in the rotunda. Ryle landed backwards on the guillotine platform. 3 button-terminated cables flung out from nowhere and lashed at the short man's face. He grabbed at all 3. The blade went up, then flashed down. The lawyer thought of crazy lines from Through the Looking Glass. The vorpal blade went snicker-snack. And now pale blue luminars began shining down from the courtroom ceiling. Emergency power was coming on, Thomas surmised. By the newly available light, he noted activity in the jury box. The lawyer leaped at Dor and pulled him to the floor just as a thin red light stabbed across the defense table. Cutter's got a laser, whispered Thomas. Stay down. Can you fix it? Yes, I think so. Well, look at that. They both looked over at the prosecutor. A dark blot was spreading over the left side of Vulpin's chest. For a few seconds, the champion of the people just stood there, sincere in his total astonishment. Then he crumpled, and he was dead before he hit the floor. We ducked and he got it, explained Thomas. We can get up now. As they clambered to their feet, a second ray of light sprayed at them. It's harmless, explained the lawyer. The beam is no longer homogeneous, just plain white light. I jammed his synchronizer. The erstwhile jury foreman yelled something unpleasant and threw the useless weapon at them. It clattered along the table and fell to the floor. The man leaped over the jury railing and ran toward the iris, which Thomas obligingly opened again. Cutter sailed outward on a fine blast of air. This is getting monotonous, muttered the lawyer. Air pressure will equalize in another couple of minutes, observed his client philosophically. Then you'll lose your job as doorman. Cutter will get away. Not really. Where can he go? The cops will eventually figure out who the bad guys are. They'll pick him up. As they waited, a final merciful clutch of blocks fell over the scene outside. And then the courtroom iris opened once more, this time to stay. Together, lawyer and client rushed down the center aisle and out into the near-lunar landscape that had once been the garden spot of Lunaplex. They picked their way through rubble and dust curtains. Poised carefully amid tumbled basalt masonry, they stared down at the face in the basket. The sparse hair stood straight out from the scalp, as though from a strong electrostatic discharge. But the look on the dead face convinced them that was not the cause. The wide eyes were filled with a weird blend of awe and terror. Thomas knelt down to close the eyes. As he did this, he had a curious prickling thought. Had he accomplished this miracle of timing, air blast, and body velocity? Or was this, as some might contend, the act of an interfering God? Forget it, Thomas, he told himself. Too deep for you. Quentin. Dor was tapping him on the shoulder. As he got up, his client pointed to a second body, partially hidden in the rubble. A single massive block had crushed the head. Thomas suddenly felt faint. He had caused this. He had no qualms about Ryle, but this second accidental corpse? Murder! He had done murder! Relax, dear chap. It's Cutter. The people are grateful to you. You saved them in the expense of a long trial. Cutter? Ryle, Vulpin, Cutter, truly a dies irae, day of rage, but let this be the end of it. At this instant, he sensed a near soundless rumbling, coming as though from sub-lunar depth. He and Dor exchanged wandering glances. Now what? They were answered immediately. The jets of the nearby French fountain burst into noisy life. "Water!" shouted Thomas over the howl of the spray. "Real water! We opened up a fissure right below us!" Dor grinned back at him, then pointed. Only 2 of the streams met overhead. The third spigot had been knocked away by falling debris. It was spraying across the pool and onto the guillotine. The machine and the 2-piece Lord Chancellor were being liberally laved by water sparkling red in the light of the distant sun. Thomas pointed at the bronze plaque affixed to the misjointed jet. "Purgaro, I purify. Let it be so." "Where does it drain to?" wondered Dor. "Ultimately to general waste, I suppose." Another commotion. They were nearly knocked down by a figure dashing past. The apparition paused a moment before the pool, now beginning to fill, and then they now recognized Dr. Jarvis of the Geologic Survey, held his arms up in great victorious thrust and began to speak in tongues. "What's he saying?" Dor asked mildly. "I caught apophyllite, brucite, polymonite. I think he's reciting all lunar minerals that contain water of crystallization. It's rather a long list. When he gets to zoisite, I wonder if he will repeat." They watched the survey director as he ripped off shoes, jacket, trousers, shirt, and tossed them away. Then underwear, socks, everything. Then he was in the pool, dancing, screaming, pirouetting. His spectacles dangled precariously from one ear. "Is he happy?" asked Dor. "Yes, I think so," said the lawyer. "In a lunar-like way," he added to himself. He let the thought meander on. On Earth, people under lunar influence are called lunatics. A fortiori, what do they become when they live here? "Gentlemen," he looked around. The damage control crew had arrived with vans and sweepers, stretchers, and body bags. The foreman was politely urging everyone to leave. That was fine with him. He wanted to call Natus. If he could just hear her voice, he thought he could re-enter the real world. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a couple of coins, and tossed them into the frothing pool. And so back to AA. Several hours later, they were finally able to return to the rotunda. They surveyed the scene of former catastrophe. The fountain was now working beautifully. The 3 jets were united overhead at the proper point. Dr. Jarvis, now fully clad, was sitting silently on the pool edge, with his trousered legs dangling in the water. Madame de Maintenon would have approved, decided Thomas. All the clutter of fallen stones had been hauled away. There was no sign of corpse or guillotine. Terrazzo Plaza flooring had been scrubbed and polished. The great circular hole overhead had been temporarily sealed off with a hemisphere of thick polyolefin. "They got what they wanted," said Thomas. "Those 3? And what might that be?" asked Michael Dor. "He's Saturnal." Did they now? There was something chilling in Dor's question that made the lawyer decide not to carry the matter further. He might find out who Michael, who is like God, Dor was, and he was not sure he really wanted to know.
Right.
Okay. So, lengthy reading there because I really think that gives you the survey of what is going on in this book. Part Looney Tunes, part like overeducated philosophizing on things.
All right. So how does it all end, Chris?
Okay, let's bring it home here. So Dor offers Quentin a deputy director position at Lamplighter since the company is going to be supremely successful, but instead Quentin opts to remain a patent lawyer with amazing psionic power.
Yeah, I mean, patent lawyer and deputy director are very different jobs. So,
Yep.
Right. Yep.
He comes up with the perfectly rhythmically composed patent for the psi enhancer that will definitely land on Natus' desk in the patent office, and upon calling her, insists they be married within a month, to which Natus assents. The end.
Oh, wow. I really thought Natus was going to end up being like a double agent. Like, I thought she was going to
No,
be...
this book fails the Bechdel test so fucking hard, Paris. The only female character is here to be pined after as a prize for doing well in the lunar trial of the century. That's all she is.
That's rough.
He's even, like, I didn't mention the part where he, like, can detect a specific kind of scent on her that only Quentin can detect for some reason.
Oh, man. Ugh. That's painful.
I'm wondering now if that means that she's like secretly an android or something like that. Because he always talks about this perfume that only she gives off. But it's never really used for anything. It's
that
just like
nice, yeah.
It's like how the lingerie is definitely Natus's, also because he bought the lingerie for Natus before. So I don't know, man. Like you didn't really have to have that detail.
Like, the displaying of lingerie to suggest that you will kill someone is just the weirdest 90s thing to do. It does feel like a very 90s action movie thing to do, so I guess it makes sense.
Dude, I would watch the hell out of this shit if Steven Seagal was the patent lawyer, like doing his best to just do law shit.
No,
It would be the funniest shit in the world, dude.
No, I don't know. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Steven Seagal is a criminal creep, so no thanks.
That's true.
You.
That's true. Jean-Claude Van Damme would also be pretty funny. Okay, Paris. So that's
Dolph
Lunar
Lundgren.
Justice.
Dolph Lundgren would be perfect. Doesn't he have like
oh my God,
PhDs or something?
Actually,
in, like,
yes.
physics?
Actually, yeah. It's Dolph Lundgren. You're right.
Or maybe just one. I forget. But he's an accomplished scientist, so I feel like that would make a help. Someone do this, please. Dolph, come back.
Fan casting for Lunar Justice happening now.
Oh.
Okay, so that's Lunar Justice. Let's move into
Great.
our rubric here, Paris. We're going to start with technical construction. And, like, it's fine. Like, as you can tell from that, this is actually
it's fine.
Somewhat thought through publishing endeavor here, shall we say?
Well, that's why we keep the plot construction as a separate
Yes.
point.
Yes.
Because
Well edited. I didn't detect any typos. Everything is pretty normal here. There is the, every chapter begins with a silly quote from classical literature that mentions the moon a little bit. So you might deduct a point for that, but I'm honestly just going to give it a 1 for technical construction here.
yeah, I wouldn't deduct a whole point for quotes. They would have to be really egregious quotes.
Some of the worst quotes we've ever seen at the beginning of chapters. Okay, on to plot construction here. So general coherence here, Paris, is very bad. So it might be me and how I explained or how I understood things here, but like, first of all, as we talked about before, why is this even a moon case? Why is this even a treason case? Very, like, you have to really buy into a lot here to let that slide. Also, Quentin he has plenty of opportunities to like not go to the moon. Just leave early on. Don't take the case. Like, it makes no sense to me that he would just continue doing this. In the book, it's kind of described as he's like, well, it's a kangaroo court. I'm not going to let this stand. But you're like, you decided to be just an average patent lawyer because you just wanted to kind of have a regular 9 to 5 and not bother with big shit. So it's very out of character, I think, for him to be like, yeah, I'll take on this huge case for a random guy that basically conspiracied me up here to the moon.
Yeah, I had a lot of questions during the reading of the summary. So
also, the whole moonquake to open up the rotunda thing didn't make much sense to me. After rereading that chapter, I'm going to say that it wasn't a glass dome, and I just really let the cover dominate my mental image of what the rotunda was.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm going to go with that because otherwise it doesn't make any sense.
Fair enough.
And on top of that, like, as we mentioned before, wouldn't a red sun suddenly appearing in our solar system fuck everything up really hard for everyone?
I feel like it would, but I don't know enough about space to be sure, but it does
I'm reasonably sure that any sort of big mass suddenly appearing anywhere in the solar system would fuck up a lot of orbits, and that would have a cascading effect. But maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Earth could handle a second sun appearing right about where Jupiter is just fine. I don't think so,
man.
though.
I don't think so either. Oh.
Okay, as far as rules following, well, there are no rules in here, as we have found in the Lunar Kangaroo Court, as mentioned. So, like, I just kind of let that go. So there are no rules. Nothing makes sense. Again, not very well set out here. And as far as character quality, like, there's no depth here, right? They're just here to move the silly plot along. And again, like, fails the Bechdel test so hard with Natus that it needs remedial Bechdel courses or whatever.
Yeah, go back to Bechdel kindergarten.
So, solid -1 on this one, Paris. I have to say that the coherence is right out the window. Moving into moments to moment, our prose quality and dialogue quality. So, like, I think this book does something in terms of older sci-fi style that I actually enjoy. In that it tries to be a little scientific about it. So we are mentioning a whole lot of stuff about like lunar geologic surveys and like how nuclear reactions can create seismic events that might like cause something to collapse, which is like loosey-goosey science for sure. But there's one section I kind of wanted to read that it's the first witness explaining like nuclear reactions that occur to create suns, essentially. And I think this is reminiscent of like earlier hard sci-fi stuff where it was like someone writing this probably had a little bit, if not a lot, of actual scientific knowledge to apply. Whereas nowadays we get some of that hard sci-fi out there, but it's more about like science fiction is just future magic, right? Like we have some technology that is magical in some way, and we're not really bothering to explore like the whys and hows of that. Okay, so I'm just going to find that particular passage. So this is Quentin Thomas cross-examining the first witness.
Right.
The defense expects that Dr. Zoll will cleave to his oath, said Thomas. We waive the truth drug. All had gone as everyone had expected. Fulpin shrugged. Your witness. Counsel for defense approached the podium. He exchanged non-committal stares with the witness. He began slowly, almost contemplatively. You say we need a temperature of 10 million to start hydrogen fusion. Yes. And the sun has 40 million. Yes. The sun is hot because it fuses hydrogen. Basically, yes. You mean it's really a bit more complicated? Well, overall, the solar mechanism is 1 carbon-12 reacts with 4 hydrogens, protons that is, to make 1 helium-4 plus radiation. And even that is somewhat oversimplifying, isn't it, Doctor? Of course. You want the whole thing? Yes, just to help the jury understand what's going on. Well, in the sun, the cycle starts with 1 atom of carbon-12 and 1 proton. Hydrogen atom, that is. They fuse and give 1 atom of nitrogen-13, which decomposes to carbon-13 plus a positron and a neutrino. Carbon-13 plus proton then gives nitrogen-14, which soon fuses with protons to give oxygen-15, which loses a positron and a neutrino to give nitrogen-15, which fuses finally with 1 proton to give carbon-12 and helium-4. And then you start over. Thank you, Doctor. Very concisely put. You start out with carbon-12, you have carbon-12 left over. Carbon-12 is sort of a, what do you call it? Catalyst. Yes, catalyst, that's the word. It isn't used up, but it's absolutely essential to the reaction. Quite so. You can't fuse hydrogen without carbon-12? I wouldn't go that far. Actually, any of the isotopes in the sequence would serve the same function. And those are? Dr. Zoll ticked them off. Well, in order of their entry into the mechanism, nitrogen-13, carbon-13, nitrogen-14, oxygen-15, nitrogen-15. Would you agree with me, Dr. Zoll, that carbon-12 plus each and every one of those isotopes is included in one or more of the shipments of nuclear waste deposited on Jupiter by the Lamplighter Project? Yes, but they're all useless, because the temperature is too low. Exactly. But aren't there other nuclear processes that don't involve carbon-12 and which would provide plenty of heat? Not sure what you mean. Well, let's consider the Big Bang. You're familiar with the Big Bang theory? Of course. Did the Big Bang make any carbon? Probably not. But stars were born and they radiated light and heat. Of course. Oh, I see what you're driving at. They used the proton-proton fusion mechanism. Do you want me to go into that? Please do. 2 hydrogen atoms fuse to give deuterium plus an electron and a neutrino. Deuterium reacts with another proton to give hydrogen-13, hydrogen-3, tritium. 2 tritiums fuse to give helium-4 and 2 protons, and you start over. At 1 million Celsius, the proton-proton mechanism predominates. Above that, say at least 10 million degrees, the carbon-12 cycle is the main line. After the early stars made a little carbon-12, let me interrupt, Doctor, just to clarify. Did I understand you to say that you can start the stellar process by proton-proton fusion at a temperature as low as 1 million degrees? Well, yes, but even that is way above anything on Jupiter. What is the temperature of Jupiter, Doctor? Or should I say in Jupiter? It varies depending on where you measure it. At the cloud tops, it registers about minus 130 degrees Celsius. At the center, we estimate 30,000. That's a bit warmer, but not nearly hot enough to start any kind of nuclear reaction. Can't the nuclear waste provide a certain amount of local overheating? Dr. Zoll shrugged. I don't know. So you can't deny the possibility. The trouble is, Counselor, any local heating would be instantly dissipated. Jupiter is an enormous heat sink. But for a small, finite time, temperatures of the order of 1 million or even 10 million degrees might result? Oh, I suppose. And in contact with the planet's liquid metallic hydrogen? Wild speculation. Do you say it could not possibly happen? The idea is bizarre. But if we had sufficient nuclear fission at just the right spot, that would give a temperature of at least 1 million for at least a brief instant, wouldn't it? Possibly. And if that occurs at the hydrogen layer, what would happen? I don't know. If you don't know, you can't rule out ignition, can you, Doctor? This is ridiculous. Vulpin rose. Your Honor, Dr. Zoll has said he doesn't know, but Mr. Thomas keeps boring in. He's harassing the witness. Make him switch to some other area. Move on, commanded Ryle. Nothing further, said Thomas. No redirect, said Vulpin. You may stand down, Dr. Zoll. Call your next witness, Mr. Vulpin. Courage, my boy, whispered Dwarf. What to say, thought Thomas. That's one short witness for treason. They need just one more, and then it's the guillotine. I've got to do better. So I read that because it is like super hard atomic science happening right there. And I did look it up a little bit, and that is all true as far as I can tell.
Cool. Great. I love that. When a book actually like includes real science and takes care to make sure it's accurate. That's
and
great.
Having it happen in the context of what the book is about, like in a court case about igniting Jupiter, which is ultimately a very silly thing, I think is like what this book does well. There's like some of that meandering philosophizing and thinking about dancing nude in the Marriott with Natus while you compose iambic pentameter patent claims and whatever. So it's like somewhat overeducated in some areas, shall we say? I don't know if overeducated is the right word, but you know.
I don't know. I actually think all of that would be points in the positive for me, although I didn't read it, but from what you're describing, I feel like I appreciate all that stuff, and it would sort of elevate for me a kind of schlocky sci-fi book, you know.
I actually think it did as well, even though I think at some portions in the book, it went like a little bit too deep into that, like where it was like a little needless. That's not a point against it. I'm not deducting a point for this. I'm actually giving the moment to moment here a 1 because this is a schlocky sci-fi book, but there is some hard science happening in here, which is immediately kind of swept in amongst the sea of loosey-goosey science of what happens if we throw a second sun into the middle of the solar system.
And the whole, like, mechanics behind the dome and rotunda explosion and the nuclear explosions to measure water when, like, we could just take samples and see water evidence, guys. We don't need to nuclear about it.
I think the nuclear was, like, find where the mineral deposits might be so you know where to even start digging to take samples is part of it.
That's completely ridiculous. I can't get behind that. I don't think that's right. So
yeah, I appreciated the line that this book was walking of being silly for the most part, but having a little bit of like your old school hard sci-fi vibe happening in there. So I liked that about this book. And the dialogue is, again, very kind of like winky nudgy, like they got what they wanted, peace eternal, which, you know, a little cheesy, but for what this book is, I think it serves the purpose here. Okay. Yeah. Into Terriblo's presence. This one's hard to score for this. I mean, we have like it's on the moon, haha, kind of like fun parody aspect of certain things. There's definitely chaotic jurisdictional things happening here.
Yes, as we previously discussed.
The Ha levels are also kind of high.
We talked about a lot of those just now. You know.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna give this a 1. This has to be at least a 0. I think.
I'd agree.
I don't know if it's a negative 1 because, like in this case, you know, the chaotic silliness of it is sort of the point of things, and I think when we usually give a negative 1 on Terriblo's presence, this is about like that was absolutely not the point that you were trying to drive at, and it's just chaotic for no reason. So I want to give this a 0 on Terriblo's presence. And then finally, should this exist, would readers of this genre enjoy this? I think yes, actually.
Yeah.
If you like old school schlocky sci-fi that has some hard science in it, this is actually pretty perfect. Do we feel as if the author's goal was met? Probably. I'm guessing if you're writing like this, like the writing style serves what is trying to happen here is
right.
The summary. Does it add anything new, interesting, or novel? I guess silly lunar court is a vibe. I liked the patent claims having to be an iambic pentameter thing. Stuff sounds like that popping up, like silly, funny ideas that aren't like, you know, literary genius or anything, but they're just creative. I like that.
Yeah.
Did it take something from us? No, absolutely not. I actually kind of enjoyed myself reading this book. I would actually recommend reading Lunar Justice. I think it's actually worth the read.
Wow.
What should someone read instead of this? Just read this. Like, despite how,
you actually liked this, so.
Despite how incoherent some of the plot stuff is, and again, maybe I'm a dumbass and I missed some stuff, as I think I missed something with the rotunda not being glass, because I just like looked at cover and my brain was like, that's what it looked like now. So I actually do think this book should exist. So I think this is a point here, Paris.
Cool.
So final score: technical construction 1, plot construction -1, moment to moment 1, Terriblo's presence 0. Should this exist 1 for an overall score of 2, Paris. So high marks for Lunar Justice. I enjoyed this. This is the kind of thing that I kind of want to come into my lap when doing Terrible Book Club. So thank you, Beast with the Least. And thank Terriblo that I got picked to read this one, because I feel like it was easy street. I'm sorry, Paris, that you didn't get to have this one. You might have had some real fun with it. Okay. Can we fix it? I think if you just seal up some of the general plot incoherence, like give me a reason that it should happen on the moon, like maybe Dor took investments from lunar entities in particular. That would have just like knit up really nicely.
What? I think what Harness should have done is build a system that automatically patches the plot holes so that, when a reader encounters some fissures, they're just
that are blowing us all into the vacuum of incoherence.
Yes, of incoherent book space. I feel like I agree with you there. It just seems like it needed a little tweaking in terms of some of the scientific plot elements, and also just like, what's up with these just jurisdictional, insanity going on. From what I understand, I would also say that Naddis should just not exist. If we're not going to give her a real personality, just cut that. Like, do we need this underlying plot of him wanting to marry this lady? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, minimally, this is like a fig leaf of a defense here. She is a extremely competent patent lawyer. She is described as being more competent than Quentin Thomas, and like that's kind of like why he's like super into her.
Oh, okay.
So she's not just sort of like damsel in distress, ditzy kind of princess type. She is a very like accomplished woman that is educated and smart and all that stuff, but she's only here to be used as a sort of pining after
device.
Object. Yeah, as a plot device.
So I guess my one critique is like either fully flesh her out or just cut that. Like she doesn't even need to, that doesn't even need to be there for the story to work.
Just make the Lord Chancellor like threaten Quentin's family or something instead. Hopefully he's not like sniffing his mom's lingerie instead or whatever. I don't know,
him. Just like, I will kill you. Like that's all it's gonna be. Like it's not that complicated.
Good point. Okay. It is time to thank our patrons here, Paris. Shout out to our lurkers on Patreon who aren't currently donating but still grace us with their watchful gaze. We see you too.
I see you.
Feel free to be on there. You don't have to pay, but like I just wanted to give a quick shout out to 50, Anna, Anya, Arendt, BB89, Carol, Caroline, Eldritch Nemo. Oh God. It's just a fish with like unknowable proportions. George, Gray, Jan, Katie, Kristen, Last Man on Earth are one, Robin, Samantha, Throttle19, and Zoe. Some of those were former patrons, so you've done your duty, I would say. Thank you to all those who are bothering to watch.
Yeah, you can go to Planet Peaceful Earth, or what the fuck is it called? The resort. God damn it.
Peace Eternal.
Joke up. Peace Eternal Resort. That's where you guys are.
Also, thank you to our bad bookworms like Ben, Donnie, Emily, Jakob, Jared, Scott, and Will. Our exacting editors, Kieran, David, D, Emmy, Funny Robot with Antennas, Greg, Harry, 7, Martin, Root Beer Cutie, and the Ugly One. Our loathsome librarians, Veronica, Beast with the Least. Extra thanks this episode for providing the book. Yanka, Luchek, Patricia, Julius of the Void, the taco-eating unicorn of the hot springs. And our pesky publishers like Miles, Austin, Patrick, and Fred. That's just like 4 dudes there.
4 dudes just getting ready to punish us with thicker tomes to hurt us.
Oh, God. And, of course, our Ko-fi donors like Mark, Tracy, our ever-faithful Kiwi Thing, and Excavating Lizard. along with Martin F. Brenna and Matthew, who relieved us of terrible books. If you want some terrible books we've read for the show, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page, like Lunar Justice, because it's a physical copy.
Yeah, I still have not put up all those books that Chris has in his house. I am very behind, but I will.
That's okay. If you're hearing this episode, you can just direct message us and ask for Lunar Justice.
Please just ask us for books. We would like to get rid of them.
Even if it's not on Ko-fi, just take a swing, right? Be like, is this one a physical copy that you guys have? And it'll be yes or no.
Yep, take them.
All right, Paris, that's it for Lunar Justice. I'm off to the moon for no reason because I was called up there to represent someone in a horrible musician thing. I don't know where this joke is going. I'm going to the fucking moon because nothing makes sense.
I would recommend that there is an excellent episode about the moon from that podcast, The Emerald, that I've mentioned in the past. Again, even if you're skeptical, I think the moon episode is a really, really good one to get a little scientific definition on your frou-frou woo-woo. So listen to the moon episode. I'll put it in the notes for the episode if you want to get into some cool moon stuff. No shitty courts, only cool moon stuff.
With more educated people than me, at least at the helm here. Okay, Paris.
All right, thank
you
moon. For serving me some Lunar Justice, Chris, and thank you, Beastwiththeleast, for delivering or sending Lunar Justice to us in the mail. That's great.
Yeah, I'll see all of you on the moon at some point, I guess, because that's where I'm going. Goodbye. I'm on the moon. Away!
Away!
Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audio-visual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com.